Hello and welcome to Ask the Open Source Experts. Thank you so much for your patience and for being here with us today. We're going to have a great couple minutes talking a little bit about why Azure is the cloud for open source developers. We are not going to waste time today. We're going to open up the chat function so that you can all send your questions right away. I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues today and really excited about all the announcements, all the tech that we've seen that Microsoft built over the last few days. And today you're going to get answers from a couple of our experts working on open source technologies here at Microsoft. When we talk about open source in the cloud, we are talking about the platforms where applications are built, whether that's Linux or Kubernetes. We're talking about the development tools, the languages, and all the integrations with third-party tooling that you know and love, as well as all the databases, the analytics, and the machine learning services, all with security in mind. And we're going to talk a little bit about secure application development today. As I said, we're going to be opening up the chat function for questions in just a minute or two after a couple of reminders are going to be posted as well. We're going to have a moderator helping us today. Michael's and a few of our colleagues are going to be helping route the questions that you're going to be posting. As a reminder, this session may be recorded. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone that makes this event possible. And all of people that have worked to bring great open source content to Microsoft Build this year. We are here to create a respectful, friendly, fun, and inclusive experience for all participants. So thanks for your help on that. Without further ado, today I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Aaron and Yelena, not only representing the great work we're doing on application platform and AI frameworks, but the thousands of people and developers at Microsoft that are working in and with open source technologies. There's been a lot of very interesting tech and demos this last couple of days. But Yelena, we particularly watched that exciting demo with PyTorch Profiler, debugging, and analyzing large-scale deep learning model. I just want to understand, how does this help developers innovate faster?
Sure. So as we showcased in our demo, PyTorch Profiler greatly being a big help to our data scientists. It helps us resolve bottlenecks, find them, and make our inference as well as our training much faster. So it helps data scientists to find what is wrong. And it's typically a very hard problem to solve. So we've seen how easy it is with the right tooling now.
What specific integrations can developers expect in Azure, and what kind of libraries and toolings are involved in the PyTorch integration?
So as we showcased, one of our primary integration is a TensorBoard. So we provide our profiler as TensorBoard plugin, which is a very common open source visualization tool for machine learning. So folks could use that, as well as we're integrating with Azure machine learning services and some more very famous Azure services integrations coming down into the pipeline. And in addition to that, we touched base a little bit. We invest a lot in a PyTorch community. And one of our upcoming kind of contribution that is coming is ORT module with PyTorch, which would provide very fast optimized inference to our PyTorch and training as well. So we are looking forward to see how it would speed up general life cycle of data scientists.
I love that, and I love how when it comes to data, there's a lot of that this cloud integrations, make reality for developers. It's the the hardware integrations, the different techniques, the use of this massive compute capabilities, and of course, working in the open source technologies and open source standards is critical for that as well. I read the blog post and I noticed a couple mentions about Onyx. I wanted to understand a little bit. What is Microsoft involvement with Onyx, and what can we expect in the future about that?
So Onyx is our open source project, which is fully kind of contributed by Microsoft, and it provides a couple of kind of angles. It's a portable format, so you could basically, our open source developers could develop their machine learning in any framework, be it Keras, TensorFlow, PyTorch, and convert them to portable formats. So they could run it's kind of uniformly. And second part is Onyx runtime, which provides optimizations. So it's capable of running with developed in any framework machine learning models on common runtime, which also takes care of talking to the acceleration behind the scenes. So whatever hardware accelerators you might have, it has backends that would be utilized, and your model would perform very fast. So we are pretty active in this space as well.
That's very exciting. And another great demo that we saw today was Dapper's. Aaron, tell me a little bit about Dapper. How are developers thinking about cloud native development, and what kind of place, what's Dapper's place in that thinking about developing in the cloud?
Yeah, definitely. So with Dapper, I'll actually take you back to early 2019 when the Azure Incubations team, which I work for, led by Mark Rusinovich, the CTO of Azure, he was working with his technical assistant at the time, talking about how a lot of enterprises are moving to like cloud native applications, ones which are very event driven. They run on things like Azure Functions and on containers and have API gateways, and I'll communicate and run on things like Kubernetes or Service Fabric. And he was hearing from customers and seeing all over that a lot of developers in that microservices and cloud native space were being asked to run and create microservices which were could scale super well, could be resilient to outages and faults, but we're also portable, meaning that you're not locked in with certain sets of SDKs and certain sets of platforms. And so you can take your application and run it not just on Azure, but also on the edge on like Kubernetes or even on like your local machine. And that's where Dapper comes in. It's the distributed application runtime. DAPR. It allows you to write event-driven portable microservices that span both cloud and edge. And what I mean by that is everything is built around a pluggable component model, and those provide building blocks. So for example, one of our building blocks is state management. And so if you were to, without Dapper, try to build a microservice that was stateful and could save and retrieve state, you'd have to integrate with some sort of SDK, whether that be Azure Table Storage or Azure Cosmos DB or AWS DynamoDB or Redis Cache. And in order to switch from state store to state store, you'd have to go and rip out all of those SDK implementations and put in your new one if you want to, say, take it from Azure to Kubernetes on-prem. So with Dapper State Management, we take care of all of the hard parts and all of the getting it started with retries and circuit breakers. And then we also give you these component files. So you can take, you saw this in Donovan Brown's demo today earlier on in Build, you can take an entire application and instead of using an SDK, you use a building block API. So for example, if you want to save state for your application, you just call on to the Dapper Sidecar, which is listening on localhost, and you say, hey, Dapper, go and save my state. And Dapper will go and integrate with that state store, go and save the state, and return to you via the API an OK or a failed message. So like 200 OK, we've saved your state. And then later on, you can go and retrieve that state using the same localhost API. So we make getting and storing state extremely easy, but it doesn't stop there. We also do publish and subscribe messaging. We do integrate with secret stores to retrieve secrets from and not pass those in through environment variables or through plain text. We do external bindings. So you saw in the Twitter sentiment analysis that we were actually triggering our application through Twitter, and you didn't see any Twitter SDKs or Twitter code in our demo. Dapper was taking care of all of that. And whenever a tweet triggered that input binding, it called onto an endpoint or a route within your application. And we're also adding additional building blocks. And so if you want to learn more, I highly recommend going to dapper.io just to learn about our extensive building block catalog and how you can integrate with us.
And Michael has been already sharing some very useful resources with everyone, some of the blog posts that go deeper into all of this. You mentioned sidecars, and it's kind of a trigger word for me. It made me think of a couple things, made me think of Kubernetes, and whether that's the only runtime that's supported in the world of Dapper. And also, I thought of the service mesh. This sounds a little bit like that. How does it relate to a service mesh when we talk about Dapper?
Oh, great question. So first, Dapper is not just a Kubernetes technology. When we first released Dapper, we wanted to make sure that it worked well, whether you're a developer working on your local machine. So we support Windows, Linux, Mac OS. So when I say Sidecar, that's just the Dapper process that handles all of that logic. So when you're running locally, it actually runs as its own process, Dapper-D. And so then your applications can call into that Dapper-D process just on your local machine. And then we also have a Kubernetes mode, so we make it easy to get up and running in Kubernetes as well. And in that case, the Sidecar process, Dapper-D, actually runs within this as a container within the same pod as your application. So it's the same Dapper functionality. We just deliver it as a process on your local machine or as a container within your pod for Kubernetes. As for service meshes, Dapper is not thought to be a service mesh. We do integrate with them though. So if you're using Istio, you can, or other service meshes like Open Service Mesh within Azure or Microsoft, you can actually use them side by side. Service meshes tend to be written and created for more of the infrastructure and operations side. So usually the people setting up your infrastructure will create those service meshes and do things like traffic routing or blue-green deployments, things like that to really shape that network traffic. Whereas Dapper is built for developers. So Dapper is meant to be used by the developers of the application who are deploying that onto the infrastructure. And then side by side sits those service meshes, which are configured by the infrastructure ops department.
I love the focus on the developer and across the life cycle. Both of you are telling me stories that cater to different times in the life of a developer. From the architecture and design of an application to the actual concerns of implementation and operation to the observability, debugging, profiling, and throughout that whole thing, doing it in an open way is it's such an important thing. I'd come back to you, Aaron, later to talk about security, but Elena, I wanted to ask about support because these are two things that seem to be part of our DNA and the way we do things, not just in an open way, not just cool technology, not just making complex things like distributed systems more manageable and approachable for everyone, but it's also doing so so that enterprises and more different types of organizations can enjoy all the benefits. Can you tell me a little bit about our support story for PyTorch?
Sure, thank you for asking it. As we just announced during build, our new offering, PyTorch Enterprise. Basically, it's designed to put enterprise mind at ease, right? We all love PyTorch, it's open source community, it's development, but we need some sort of reliability and commercial support for big organizations. So we are now offering that support program. It's not kind of manageable service of some sort, it's support program that is automatically available for customers who are on unified on premier tier of support. And they would be able to benefit from more prioritized troubleshooting. So if some error occurs, something needs to be fixed, Microsoft together with Facebook would collaborate to provide hotfix and feed it back to open source community as well. So it's kind of bi-directional, helping open source community to evolve faster as well. And we would provide also long-term support program up to 2 years for specific PyTorch versions. So starting from PyTorch 181, and that's kind of magical number because from 181, we not only provide PyTorch Enterprise, Profiler was also integrated with PyTorch starting from 181. So this version gives us much more benefits, and Microsoft contributed a lot to PyTorch community in that area.
Partnerships are such an exciting part of what we do as well. In fact, this week we're also announcing native integration for Elastic services on Azure. That's centralized billing, that's full support, that's portal integration. We have our colleagues from Elastic here as well. We'd like to share a little bit more about what is the Elastic on Azure native integration and what does that mean for customers and developers. If we got you on the line, if not, Michael, can you chime in?
Yeah, Heman, can we hear you? Can you speak? Or Adrian? Okay, so quickly share with all of you here. So I'm the product marketing manager for Linux on Azure, and we're really happy to collaborate with Elastic to be able to work closely with the Elastic team on enabling the capabilities of moving all of the sort of like in implementation hassle away, but giving you a pure experience of like running the Elastic service as a managed service on Azure directly, in which the integration involves the centralized billing, the integrated support, and also the usability across all of the different services, where you will be able to easily connect your service running on Azure with Elasticsearch and be able to use Elasticsearch to search all of your logs across all of your machines, all of your applications, and also be able to seek for support when needed. And this actually allows us to remove all of the blockers in front of like all of you for provisioning, for building up all of the necessary infrastructure, but instead you can use that out of the box right away and attach your Elasticsearch to your application in just several clicks. So with this integration, we're really happy that Elastic chose us and to work with us very closely and be able to land the service for customers. And moving on to the future, we're also integrating a lot more in terms of services and also different capabilities, including like Azure Monitor and also the Kibana and a lot of the other features that's coming along. So this is actually a very exciting news for all of the customers using Elastic. So no more hassle on building up any infrastructure, and you can just use it right out of the box and get everything sorted out with the support directly from Elastic team, who's the creator behind Elastic.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Tons of announcements this week. Another one, we don't have our colleague Bruno here, but the general availability of the Microsoft build of OpenJDK for Java 11 is actually just one of many exciting Java announcements happening this week. And if you look back just the last year, Microsoft has had tremendous waves of innovation in the Java space. We're going to be sharing the link to that blog post with more information about all of the investments on Java. Having Microsoft's own build of OpenJDK allows us to quickly respond to the needs of our customers and internal teams. In fact, there's a couple interesting examples that the team has been sharing around how Java is used at Microsoft, which is always fascinating. In fact, that was one of the things shown in the Dapper demo as well. And around Dapper and security, I wanted to kind of zoom out a little bit and ask Aaron a little bit about software supply chain attacks, software supply chain security. The more components that we use in open source is used, our nature is used using and sharing these open source components, packages, libraries, etc. The more cautious we have to be and intentional about how to deal with the security implications of all of that. I wanted to get some general thoughts on what should developers keep in mind. What are things to watch out for in the coming months? There's a lot of activity, a lot of new focus, including in the US around this particular world.
Yeah, no, this is a huge area, and I could speak for over an hour just on open source security supply chain. So I'll keep it concise. Yeah, as Jose mentioned, when you think about your software, you really need to think about the supply chain, or kind of the path that your software took to go from all of the packages that you use and all the upstream dependencies and all of those upstream dependencies. Because what you may not realize is that when you import an open source project into your software, you're actually not only importing that project, but also the projects that that imports itself. And so when you design your software, there's actually a lot of things you can do to keep your software secure today. And there's a lot of things coming down the pipeline that are extremely exciting. As Jose mentioned, this has actually gotten a lot of attention this year with recent US executive orders on the government side, as well as a lot of high profile attacks. Just in the past couple of years, we've seen a kind of different variety, and they go from the technical, there's a bug in your code, or an upstream dependency, to more of the social engineering as well, which is a huge area of exploit. For example, back in 2018, EventStream, which is an open source NPM package, one of the maintainers didn't have time to maintain it anymore, so he handed it over to a new person who ended up injecting malicious bits and locking out all the existing maintainers. And there's also another thing that we watch called typo squatting, which is, let's say you go to import a package like cross env or Python 3 date util, and you mistype a character. There are a lot of malicious actors out there who are going to go and register like really close names to those packages and make those malicious. So they might actually serve the same function, like they might do the same thing, so you would never know that you're using a malicious package, but that's through typo squatting. So what can you do? I mean, step one, go multi-factor auth everything. If you have a GitHub account, if you have a package manager account, if you are working in Azure, definitely go enable multi-factor authentication, because you've just gotten rid of over 99% of all identity-related attacks. Also, coming up is a thing called software bill of materials. So if you think about all of the software that you write and all the software that you consume and that they consume in upstream, a software bill of materials is a new idea where you can actually generate like a manifest of everything that went into your software, and then who contributed to that code, and like, for example, do they have multi-factor auth enabled? Do all the licenses match up with your organization requirements? And so I think in the future, we're going to be moving towards a lot of like more automated. So for example, if you work in an organization that requires that every piece of code comes from like a subset of authors, you can enforce that through software bill of materials, which sits in your DevOps pipeline and monitors all that software, and then can attest and attribute to the fact that this software has kind of been built and like transferred and gone through package managers, which all attest the fact that this build has not been tampered with, it's secure, and that you can trust that you're running secure code. So I know that was a lot of information, and again, I could talk at length about all of this. So I recommend back at RSA 2020, Mark Rusinovich, CTO of Azure, did a great talk on open source security, which highlights all of these examples and more, and has some demos. I'm a little biased because I helped contribute to that, so I had a lot of fun building those demos and writing a lot of those slides. So, but yeah, in summary though, go enable MFA, and I think just start to audit where you're taking some key dependencies.
I also think some of the RSA announcements for 2021 for around Azure AD, they bring some very interesting features that can be, already save a lot of time and implement some best practices. One that I am particularly excited about, because I'm a Linux user, is the preview of the Azure AD login, SSH login capability. So that's an interesting one. And hey, it's not just software bill of materials. When you think of models and data streams and the integrity of all of that, it's definitely a lot, but at the same time, it's such a necessary thing for all developers to start thinking about, and not just people that are focused on security and compliance. It's just everyone's job. Thank you very much for your time today. I want to make sure everyone knows that we acknowledge there's a lot of announcements, a lot of tech, a lot of blog posts and news. But there are some principles and some foundational things we really want everyone to take away from this. When we talk about how we approach open source in the cloud, we're talking about collaboration, not just with the communities and the broader ecosystem, but the commercial partnerships. And today we talked about the partnership with Elastic. The security is a critical aspect of it, and support, particularly enterprise support, is a specific focus where, when it comes to integrated support, the ability to access the experts, doesn't matter if you're, in the portal or through the APIs and with the tools, you can access that comprehensive coverage, and the flexibility of running applications and meeting you where you are. Those are all some of the elements of our open cloud approach. There are more things you can learn about how we do open source in the cloud. Make sure you check out our most recent blog on this open source blog that's right here, and catch up with all of the sessions and all the great content of not just Build, but also Ignite. These are some of the few resources you can use. You can also contact us on Twitter. the open@Microsoft Twitter account as one channel you can use to engage with everyone that's working with open source at Microsoft. Thank you again to everyone that has made this possible, as well as to all the attendees for the questions and the engagement throughout. Have a great rest of the conference and a great rest of your week. And thank you to our panel as well. Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks so much.